Thank you for joining us today for Keeping the Peace in Times of Crisis. I'm Harry Dolan, and I'll be your host for the next 50 minutes. I'd like to start out with what I consider one of the most important statements that I could make as a retired police chief. You see, I served over 32 years in this incredible profession I call my calling, and 25 years as a police chief. And what have I learned? Started with my father when I was young. He was a retired New York City police sergeant. He said to me, you know, son, when you're in a jam, look around. Who's around? Who's supporting you? You know, in good times, you can look around and there's a lot of people around. But in a time of crisis, when you're really confronting some of life's greatest challenges, look around who's there with you. And that's why I say you can't hide who you are in a crisis. You know, several years ago, the command staff in Grand Rapids and I were debriefing from Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. And we were going over what went well, where were the challenges, and I stated once again, you know, you can't hide who you are in a crisis. You see, there was great heroism in New Orleans. There were people going above and beyond, medical, police, fire, EMS. General Henry, when he came in and did incredible work. That's who they are. They show themselves in times of crisis. Unfortunately, though, there were people that abandoned their posts. There are people that, long after the hurricane, were trying to get their jobs back and trying to come up with reasons why they didn't do things and why they left. I looked at the people that were criminals and started committing more crimes because they were showing you who they are in a crisis. What is so heartwarming to me, and I hope to everyone, is to look at the medical community today, our first responders, EMS, police officers, doctors, working under some of the most trying conditions. They're showing us who they are. Even when they get frustrated, they're not complaining, they're asking for more resources. Why? Because they're on the front line. And as a retired police officer, I can't help but tell you, I'd like to be back in the arena, right with you. When I see one of the Raleigh police cars go by, or a sheriff's car, an EMS, down deep in everyone that's retired, people that answer their callings, we'd like to be back in the game with you. Why? We want to show you who we are in a crisis, because we're watching you do it. You're inspiring every one of us, and please don't ever doubt that. You know, in my office, in my team here, we have a small office. It's 5 full-time people, some part-time, and a cadre of independent contractors that help us with training around the country. And as you know, our business is training around the country. Well, that's been curtailed. But what have the people on the team done? Let's set up a studio. You know, let's make sure that we're providing training. The scheduled training we've already had, we're now doing online. We're doing it live streaming, and it's making us all turn up our game. Your humble retired police chief has to learn a great deal more about this technology. Where I could stand up and talk to 1,000, now in this arena, oh, it's a challenge. But what are all the people doing in our group, our small group? They're stepping up, and they're showing us who they are. And I'm so grateful that it just makes me remember how important it is for all of us, particularly the leaders that are listening, to show everybody what right looks like. This is the time. So let's take a moment to just overview where we're going. All righty? First, with millions facing health concerns, economic struggles, and mental distress, all while government curtails normal social activities, law enforcement agencies face a very real possibility of significant levels of civil disobedience. Now, it may not be right away, it may not be overwhelming, but we should be prepared and we should understand why this may be the case. Although officers are accustomed to curtailing the unlawful activities of small groups, what makes this current pandemic crisis unique is that many civilians who are not typically apt to break the law or argue with police officers may find themselves acting out of character. Can we think of that as we move forward with the training? What are we going to discuss? Let's discuss how we're going to confront civilians who congregate in large numbers in violation of state or local mandates. Now, I'm not going to get into the law part of it. We have a lawyer here. Matthew Dolan will be doing that. There's a great deal of discussion happening today about laws and mandates and stay home. We'll cover some of that today, but that's a legal discussion. What we're going to discuss is how do we as police leaders, sheriffs, and rank and file confront it. Business owners who refuse to close up shop. Oh yeah, they're going to say, I don't want this. This is my business. I've done this all my life. And who are they? They're people that support the police. And if we're not careful, if we're not have training just like this, what if Officer Shitstorm handled that call? You know what I'm talking about. Officer Shitstorm shows up. Yeah, well, I'm telling you right now to close it up. We got a governor's order. Well, you're going to have a bit of a difficulty, and you know that, and I know that. We've got to be the ones as leaders, and also for our partners to be able to say, knock that off. We'll cover a little bit of that later, too. Friends and family, hospital patients who insist seeing their loved ones in spite of the hospital policy. Is that going to happen? You better believe it. Today, we got a message from one of our trainers who teaches verbal de-escalation for us. And he told us what happens to work in a hospital. He just sent us a message today before this presentation saying, I'm glad I got some skills. And I want to remind you of those skills at the end of the presentation. They do come in handy. You know, when we think about it, people who have been functioning well for years may become angry and anxious. Have you seen it yet? Because I sure have. Their churches have been shut. Their alcohol anonymous meetings are no longer taking place in person, and they can't take their kids to the park. You know, I have 2 young grandsons, 4 years old and 2. And as my son says, I got to run them. I got to run them. He takes them out. He takes them to the state park here, and all of that's being curtailed. Now, we're going to find other ways to deal with that, but does that work to make ordinarily law-abiding people stressed? Of course it does. Doesn't mean they don't care about us and they don't want to help others. People who would never dream of telling a cop to blank themselves may be closer to saying that than ever before. Even their peers and loved ones will say, what did you just say, Dad? Mom, we've all that have been out in this arena of public safety and public service know that this could happen. Let's remember right now who we are. We're guardians of the peace. And I know if you've been to my training before, you've heard me say this thousands of times. But you know, I would years told people when they said, what do you do? Okay, you're a cop, but what do you do? I'm a peacekeeper. That's what I do. I keep the peace. To me, it's never been a tally of get this done, that done. No. What are the community priorities? What are the police priorities? How do we get them accomplished? How do we work together directly and consult with the community? Well, I was a peacekeeper. Well, on a trip to Ireland, I couldn't help but notice that in Ireland, they refer to their coppers as Garda. And Garda, of course, is Gaelic, and I can't speak Gaelic, so please don't hold me accountable for my translation. But they would call their police officers An Garda Síochána, which I'm told is translated from the Gaelic meaning guardians of the peace. I don't know if there's a better Pelian phrase for who we are, or it strikes at the heart of what we do. We always want to leave people better than we found them, and when we go places, did we keep the peace? Did we create jeopardy? Did we leave people worse than they were? Did we actually arrest people that may not have been arrested had somebody not run their mouth or created some of the jeopardy, or somebody took things personal? We're guardians of the peace. So when I've been asked, well, define that for me, well, here's what I say. I'm a guardian of the peace. Where I walk, there will be peace. If I'm called to restore peace, I will first use my professional presence as persuasion. Like you, I've answered calls where I've shown up and people said, crap, I'm out of here, the cops are here. And when I was young, I said, man, I must look good. Well, it wasn't me, it was a lot of officers before me. I figured that out later, but it's what we represent. It's our ethos, as Aristotle would say, it's our credo. It's helped me out, and I hope it does you. So I've always told people, what you wear, how you act, your demeanor, does it matter? You better believe it. If you wear your pajamas and you answer a call and you act like you don't want to be there, if you don't think people know that, when 93% of your message is nonverbal, they know right away you don't want to be here. By your very presence, by when you come to a scene, you can start affecting the outcome of that scene. But when I meet resistance, I will, when feasible, I use my verbal skills. If my presence didn't get the job done, I'm going to go to my verbal skills of persuasion to restore the peace. If verbal persuasion is rendered ineffective by the resistance I encounter, I will then employ my physical skills of persuasion. How? With the spirit of a warrior to restore the peace. See, that's what I was called to do. And I've had people say, well, you know, Chief, that's such a beautiful quote. Well, thank you. Well, could you lose the warrior part? Why would I lose the warrior part? Well, you know, it was such a beautiful quote. I like it, Chief. But I said, how can I keep the peace if I'm not a peace warrior? Well, guardians always have the ability, the skill, the training, the wherewithal to keep the peace, even if they have to do it in an aggressive way. Well, why? And I use, as my example, St. Michael. Now, this is not a religious argument. You can be agnostic or have faith. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm using St. Michael for as an example, St. Michael is the patron saint. He is the patron saint of police, fire, EMS, military. Yeah, he's St. Michael. He's a guardian angel. Actually, he's an archangel. Translated chief, meaning chief angel. That's kind of, I like his title. He's a chief angel. But if you notice through the picture, he's been exercising. Yeah, he works out. And I know he's got wings. Let's look past the wings. But he's got a shield and a big sword. I bet he hardly has to use that. But if he has to guard a soul, oh, he's going to deploy it. Well, that's us, isn't it? Isn't that who we are? Oh, no, we're going to keep the peace. That's why we're here. But now if my presence didn't work, and if my verbal skills aren't working, and if I think there's a safety exception and I can't talk anymore, I'm going to take action immediately. But to keep the peace, I'm not scheduling an appointment to come back later. I'm going to keep the peace. That's what I do. I'm going to keep it. I'm going to restore it. That's what I do. If I got to call for additional people. Keeping the peace, being a guardian of the peace is who we are, particularly in times of crisis. We have a presentation that Dr. Johnson has done for us. He's part of our full-time team. Dr. Johnson does a lot of research briefs. I encourage you to go to our webpage. There's no charge. Just download the research briefs. He does an extraordinary job. And in this one, he talked about the public's confidence in the police might be better than you think. Let's look at this for a minute. I want to show you some graphs from his research. Now, I want to tell you something that's very important, particularly to my presenters that are listening. You know, the Heath brothers book, Made to Stick, they come up with a statistic, which is interesting because they're talking about how uninfluential at times statistics are. They say, you know, people are going to remember 5% of the statistics you give in a presentation, but they'll remember 63% of the stories. Therein lies a very, very important point for all of us as we're communicating in a crisis. It's not a war story. Telling people why this point is important and giving a personal reference or a professional experience reference is vital. Well, these statistics, I know you're going to remember 5% of them, but I want to show you some of the statistics good Dr. Johnson has prepared so that you have a good idea of how well respected you truly are. You take a look at this chart, right? Up above is the confidence in the police, and in the red chart here is the confidence in the media. I want to bring your attention to back in 1990 where we were pretty much on an even par. But as the decades go by, there's less and less confidence. Now there's a whole host of reasons for that, and I think we could have probably a whole day-long live streaming training program on that. But let's just talk about the police and how consistent you've been. People admire you and they have confidence in you. So when we're dealing with how do we keep the peace in this time of crisis, we want you to remember that. They have great confidence in you. And you know, let me share this with you. As my police attorney son has been telling us, there's a lot of debate amongst officers about the constitutional arguments about how we're doing things. And I couldn't help but tell him, I said, of course we're having arguments. We enforce the Constitution. You know, we don't bounce our head against it. We enforce it. We believe in it. So when we're given a directive to do something like go in a park and move people, okay, what's the Constitution allow us? And we don't even have to be prompted to do that. We do that because that's who you are. And that's why I believe you have these incredibly high confidence scores, because you're perceived as apolitical, as people that truly want to do the right thing. Stop watching all the TV. Start knowing this. And you know it. Think of this for just one moment. When people say, well, you know, it's not a good time to be a police officer. It's a great time to be a police officer. It's a great time to be EMS. Imagine later in years when you're a grandparent, you talk about what you've been doing. Remember Patton's quotes? If you like to study military history like I do, what does Patton say? Come on, get in the game. You don't want to say you were washing dishes back in a big war. What do you want to say? You want to say that you're in the arena or you are on the front lines. People admire you for that. Now let's go to the next graph. We're going to compare the levels of public confidence in the police alongside the levels of public confidence in Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court. Well, here you are again, right? Here's the United States Supreme Court. Here is the President, and here's Congress. I say you're doing a good job. And that's, again, what? All the way back to this chart is 1990. I think you're doing brilliantly. Right? What are these statistics demonstrate, as Dr. Johnson said, it's clear to him. There is a clear majority of the public that supports you and trusts you in your work. That confidence is something to be protected through the professional execution of your duties as officers. That's an academic who was a police officer for 4 years and does a brilliant job for us and all of you. And what does he say when he looks at those incredible statistics? Well, certainly you can find room for improvement and everything. What does he say, though? Oh, it's something to be protected. On every call for service, you're held in high esteem. We all know that. So let's talk about what's the phrase of the day. We all know the phrase. What is it? Police legitimacy. The cops aren't legit. They are legit. We are having this debate regularly now. What is legitimacy? What does it mean? Voluntary compliance is gained more through a person's perception of government police legitimacy than the fear of sanctions for non-compliance. Let me try to explain. In our great country, what we know is, in being in the greatest country in the world, we have a great deal of compliance. Malcolm Gladwell talks about this in his work. Tyler talks about legitimacy being trustworthiness, fair, treated with respect, and we'll cover that in a second. But legitimacy is that, why do I pay my taxes? Why do I basically comply? Because I believe that you are what? I believe that you fill these three dimensions, and I think Tyler's right on this. Respect. I feel like I'm treated with respect. In your respective agencies right now, when you look at the leadership team in your agency, and you say, basically, they respect us. They are. And they're fair. They don't discipline one cop more than the other. They're fair. They treat us with respect. I don't agree with them. I don't like every one of their decisions. But they treat us with respect and they're fair. And you know what? Push comes to shove, I trust them. You know what? I don't particularly like this one or that one. But you know what? I'm treated with respect. They're fair. And I trust them. Guess what you got going? You have a legitimate organization. That's what it means. And if you want to take it back further from Tyler or Malcolm Gladwell or other people that write about police legitimacy, take it back to Aristotle. What do you mean? Several thousand years ago, what did he call it? Ethos, credibility, credo. Are you perceived as fair? Are you treating your audience with respect? And are you trusted? This has been around for a long, long time. Does a community feel that way? Are the police treating me with respect? Are they fair? Do they enforce the law fairly? And do I trust them? It's a very important thing to always keep in mind, that legitimacy is vital to all of us. Well, we can go back to Aristotle, or we can go back to Sir Robert Peel. What did he say? What did Peel say in the team that he worked with that formed the new Metropolitan Police? The 9 Peelian principles that we look upon in America as the foundation of policing. What did Peel say about the situation we're in today? And police legitimacy. What did he say? Well, he put in Peelian principle number 3. Police must secure the willing cooperation of the public in voluntary observance of the law to be able to secure and maintain the respect of the public. That's police legitimacy. That's the mission of the police, right? Because if you go further and go to Peelian principle number 7, which is my absolute favorite, the police are the public and the public are the police. The police are only paid to give full-time attention to the duties which are incumbent upon all of us in the interest of the community's welfare and existence. I truly, as a police chief, enjoy reading the Peelian principles, all 9 of them, and making sure that we are reminded of their importance. Well, right now we're hearing, what I want you to do, officers, I want you to go out and use your common sense. And you may remember the case in Starbucks. And this is what I want to talk to you about, how it goes right back to what Peel said. You may remember in Starbucks. Remember what happened? This is a case no more than a year ago, where the 2 officers get called to the Starbucks. Think about calls like this happening today. They get called to the Starbucks because the barista said 2 people had come in and they weren't paying customers. So the officer gets there, walks up to the lead, I'm sure senior barista, and says, yeah, I'm Officer Dolan, I'm from the Philadelphia police. What do you got? Oh, yeah, those 2 guys over there, one tried to use the bathroom, but they're not ordering right now, and we have a policy that if you're not ordering, then you're not a paying customer, you have to leave, and they're not leaving. All right, so what do they do? Went over. Did the barista tell you have to leave? It's one of these, and bantering starts. Remember what country you're in. Right? Where you're in the greatest country in the history of the world. Who are the people more concerned for? You as the officer in a situation like that, or the 2 people minding their own business? I'll let you answer that one. So here come the officers, and what do they go into? ATM, as they'll make. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to make you. I want you to get up. We're not getting up, we're waiting on somebody. Yeah? How much money did you make? Oh, there's bantering back and forth, I'm sure. Are the officers good officers? You better believe they are. They're answering a call. They're being proactive, no doubt about it. They're good coppers. No one's criticizing that. But what happens? They tell them you're not going to leave? Okay, you're trespassing. Because you were told to leave, you're not leaving. So they arrest them. People aren't happy. On the way out, the man that they're waiting for, their partner, he comes in, and what happens? He says, what are you doing? What are you? Well, they didn't leave. They're trespassing. How long does the charge last? Not very long. Both men are released. Charges don't go forward. They settle for, I think, a small amount of money that they donated to the juvenile center there in Philadelphia. Now, what did Starbucks do? Of course, they closed all their stores, and they taught everybody and told them all that one barista said, you know, hey, they closed all the stores. I would never do that. I wouldn't ask anybody to leave. And they closed all the stores and had this webinar that we had to go on that in essence told us we suck. Well, I know. Welcome to police work. We do stuff like that all the time. That's called shotgun discipline. We blame everybody for the actions of one or two. And I don't know if there was a real problem with what the barista did, what he or she's trying to follow the policies like you or me or what they're told to do. It's downtown. The young men didn't particularly say they were convinced it was racist behavior. They just said they were arrested for trespassing. What did they need on that call for service? What did they need? Training like this. They needed a senior officer, someone who's been trained or experienced in the fine art of discretion, to ask themselves a question, just how important is this, right? Or, as one of my friends in Philadelphia told me, or a lazy officer. I said, okay, one of those would have done. Now, some of you are asking, what did they mean by that? Well, a veteran would have used discretion. I'm convinced of it. Somebody who would weigh these options here. They're not going to be taking two people out of Starbucks. Now, what do you mean a lazy one? We've all worked with an officer who comes in and goes, hey, how you doing? What do you got? Oh, those two guys, what are you doing? They've been here for about 10 minutes? All right, they cause any trouble? All right. About 30 minutes later, you don't want to report on this or make an arrest. About 30 minutes, call me back if there's any trouble. Let me have a venti mild while I'm here. I don't need any room for cream, for cheese. I mean, what just happened? Well, could that happen more now? Well, of course it is. Remember your legitimacy. Remember to ask yourself how important it is. Well, what the barista, wait a minute, you don't work for the barista. We've got to make sure everybody knows that you are a professional who has to weigh every bit of this. What's my rules on discretion as a police chief? Give it the Dolan test. Give it your Smith test. The more serious it is, the less discretion we have. Today? What else? Today and every day. Prime your team members for success. You got to show them what right looks like. You got to lead from the front. You got to define the rules of engagement. What do I mean? That's commander's intent. You've got to define what you want me to do. I think that's what should have happened in Starbucks and in many, many other cases. Where is my discretion? Are we even training in discretion anymore? If we don't have a lot of senior officers on the front line, and we'll all agree with that, are we training them more in the art of discretion? I want the agency leaders to avoid the trap of telling your city or county that you are tired of educating them and you're now going to enforce it. Now, why am I saying it? Because I'm hearing it. You know, not from my leaders in Raleigh, but I'm hearing it on the news stories about, well, let me tell you something, we're not going to educate them anymore, we're going to start arresting them. Now, is that a really good idea to be saying that right now? Because I think I can speak for every copper in your agency going, where's the boss going with that? He's going to scare them straight, or she's going to just tell them we're going to get real serious here? I'd hold off on that dialogue. I really would. And I know that I might be a captain or a lieutenant in my agency, but I'd say, hey, bosses, let's tone this down a bit. Well, why? Do you have the resources to enforce it? You know, they're going to ask you that. Yeah, they're going to ask you that on a call. Yeah, they are. They're going to say that to you. You're going to write me a ticket here for being in the park? Yeah, well, I just lost my job. All right, I'm one of the over 3 million who've lost my job. And you're going to tell me you're going to give me a ticket? How much are you going to give me the ticket for? Was that $100? Make it $1 million. That's what you're going to be up against. And when I close, in just a few minutes, I want to give you some techniques and strategy on how to handle me when I talk like that to you. Right? If your hand is called, will it hurt your legitimacy, agency leaders? If you said you're going to get serious, I'm telling you what, we're not going to play here. I'm going to get my troopers. I'm going to do this. Well, what happens when people say, go ahead? Well, go ahead. What are we going to do? We've kind of lost our legitimacy if we do that. No, I think it's more strategic. I'm going to give you an example of that. 3 million people just filed for unemployment. Some business owners will soon be former business owners. Now, I've left the public sector. back in 2012 when I retired, and I'm having at the time of my life, I'm having more fun than I deserve working with you in this format and training. Being able to take 32 years and providing it to you, particularly the mistake I've made. I've noticed all the mistakes I've made that as I've trained around the country, you really like those, so thank you for that feedback. But I've shared a lot of it with you. And what do we know? And now in a small business, it's challenging for me now. Yeah, well, what are we going to do? We're not on the road, we're not training, let's turn up the online form, but it is a very stressful time for everyone. Does the threat of a fine seem effective to these folks? No, it doesn't. You're going to close my business, is that what you're doing? Yes, sir, but you're not on the list of businesses that should be open, so go ahead, close my business, right? Yeah, what are we going to do then? Particularly if you said, do you want to go to jail? Do you want to go to jail? Oh, yeah, at least you're not going to put me in jail. That's right, I just read where you're letting criminals out. Yeah, you're letting criminals out of jail, but you're going to put me in jail because I'm losing my business and I don't know what to do. Agency leaders, provide both the department and your community with your commander's intent. It is perhaps more important today than ever that the officers not wander with, well, you know what to do, kid. Follow your common sense. They go, look, I'm 24 years old. I don't have much of that. What do you want me to do? What we know through research and what we know through practical experience is many young people, even our new generation, is saying, you speak so generally. Will you tell me specifics what you mean? That's missing in a lot of circumstances. What is commander's intent? Well, we know it. It's explain the rationale for your decision, practice, or policy. Let them know it. Where do we want to be? What's the end state? What is it that we want from our leaders today? Tell me this is going to be okay, boss, will you? You know, tell me that we're going to get through this. Give me some enthusiasm and be forward-looking. That's what they want. And they want to know how you're going to get there, and they want to know why you're doing what you're doing. This is a good time to do that for the community and also for the police department. Now, here's an example of commander's intent. My wife said to me this morning, she said, hey, Harry, you got to see this. I said, what's that? She said, the message just came out from the police department because here in North Carolina, we've been told to stay home. And the governor's, I know, and I'm assuming good intentions, he means well, and the governor wants us to stay home to help fight this horrendous pandemic. I know the intentions are noble, but can that statement, without clarification and commander's intent, cause stress? Absolutely. But what has Chief Cassandra Deck Brown done and our Raleigh Police Department leadership? Well, they've given commander's intent. My wife was impressed with it as a citizen because she said, oh, this is what the police department's saying. The Raleigh police officers will only conduct traffic stops if there is reasonable and articulable suspicion to conduct an investigative stop. Well, why is that important? Because everyone's worried about they're going to get stopped going to McDonald's. People are worried about should I or should I not be in, because there's really not a lot of commander's intent out there for that. But look what the police department just did. Now, if you're a police officer and you work in that agency, do you feel some legitimacy? I would. All right? I'm a citizen, and I'm proud of my department right here. And what they say, here's the rules of engagement for the officers. You're not going to just stop people and say, hey, did you not read the memo from the governor? No. Business is still the same with traffic stops. And then they went on to explain. And let's read this. This is what the police department put out through their social media person, Miss Sarah Rapp. She said, RPD pulling cars over and stay-at-home order. Why? Because there's stress and there's anxiety. Officers are not and will not be stopping vehicles just to check and make sure you are following the stay-at-home order. The Fourth Amendment is still in full effect. There must be reasonable and articulable suspicion to conduct an investigative stop. Other facts, please remember these. There are rumors out there. There is no curfew. Officers are not riding around ordering people to stay inside their homes. RPD is not passing out letters saying you have to have permission to be outside of your home. Quelling rumors, leading from the front is what we're seeing. And that's what we're trying to say is so very important today. And to the men and women working the front line, let me give you the advice that comes from the front line, comes from the field. This particular bit of advice is from a university police supervisor, sergeant, that was at a sports event. He told one of his subordinates, you know, this is game day. He says, yeah, I know that. No, hang on a minute. You're new, so I want to tell you about game day. He said, okay. He said, work with me for a little bit. And they walked around the campus at a football event. And the university police sergeant was talking to him. Then all of a sudden, the young person says, hey, Sarge, what? Look at that guy over there. He's drunk. Yeah, it looks like his wife's trying to get him in the car over there. Okay, let's look. Let's go give her a hand. Okay, but shouldn't we charge him? Shouldn't we at least write him a citation? No, that's not disorderly conduct. We're good. Thank you, ma'am. Moves along. Oh, okay. Then he sees another situation where the young person says, hey, want to get him for drunk and disruptive? Nope, that's not drunk and disruptive. We'll be able to take care of that. Then all of a sudden, the young officer, the young campus officer says, here comes a man who bumps into people and uses vulgar language and acts aggressive. And then the sergeant says, well, now that's disorderly conduct and drunk and disruptive. Well, that's what we're saying today. Right? If you enter Starbucks, you go somewhere, I'm going to give you the tips on how to exactly do this with Aristotle, but it is. This is the time that we have to be at our very, very best. I'm going to argue to you, as an officer, understanding the stress that you're having, I want you to think of every call for service, every time you're getting out of that car, that you're making an appearance, and right away your demeanor matters, and people are looking at you. And when you give a greeting and you say, folks, we all know this is challenging times. The reason I'm out here, to tell them right away, don't make them guess. The reason I'm out here is I just want to make sure that everyone's safe. No, ma'am, I'm not arresting you. That's not what's here. Please, trust me, we have no room. What I'd like to do is the following. Those are the officers that are out there today that are going to make the biggest impact. And right away when you do that, people are going to start coming down in most circumstances. Can't guarantee them all. And as we respond to a growing number of calls with frustration, misunderstanding, who thinks they can tell me to close my business, would you remember to do this every call at work and home? Use empathy. Well, what's empathy? Empathy is Latin and Greek for to see the world through the eyes of the other. You know, you may have to be called to a store that's opened and shouldn't be open, of some order in your community. Well, you go there and you say, sir, you're going to have to close the store. Well, why don't you close it? You close it. I've been here 20 years. You close it. Come on, see if you're man enough to close this. You come through me and close my store. Well, you can handle that like an amateur. All right, Bob, Sarah, get out your batons. You want to be tased? Because you're going to jail. You're going to close it. Well, we've seen the videos of those things. Not the pros. That's an amateur ability. Well, what does a pro do? What are you talking about? I don't care if the officer's been an officer for a year. What does a pro do? Well, they see the world through their eyes. Well, what do you mean? No, it's not sympathy. You can derive sympathy. Just see the world through their eyes. You see you're reacting to his words. Well, what are his words? Well, he said, you got to come through me. That's a threat. No. I'm going to watch the body. You know, if there's a conflict between what someone's saying and the body language, I've always really stressed the body language. Right? I hope you do. So I'm going to have to ask you for your safety in mind, put your hands on a car. Hey, I don't want any problem. That person worried me more as a police officer than someone who put their hands on a car and told me I couldn't. Why? Because I pay attention to the body. Why? 80% of my day, people do what I tell them. And in a case where somebody says, I have a question, they didn't follow my directive, my lawful directive. So what do I believe? My safety may be more compromised. So we all know that. I'm going to pay attention to the body language. I'm going to see if there's a bladed position. Is he balling up his fist, right? Is there a higher level of cortisol? We've all go through this training. But what do I mean by what is he saying? He's really saying, if you see the world through his eyes, I've had this business for 20 years. It's all I could do. I've been through some tough times. And you're not closing me down. There's all types of things that are going on. Well then, all right, Chief, how do you handle that then? First, would you please do that for me? Would you see the world through his eyes, slow things down? Now, if there's a safety violation, bladed position, he reaches for something, of course we're going to act. We're not talking about that. But we're talking about somebody who's been a law-abiding person in your community for 20 years. Their safety is at the forefront, but you're also going to be listening. And you paraphrase back, sir, what you're saying is you're going to be arrested. That's not what we want here. Sir, I'm seeing the world through their eyes. I hear that, sir. Sir, and what do? Well, you give them some emotional reason why it's important. You remember Aristotle, ethos, your meet and greet, logical reason, and what's the emotional appeal? The logical reason is, I believe the governor's doing what he's doing. I do because the intentions are good. No, let me explain why. Right, sir, hang on just a moment. You know, there's a hospital down the road here. They're worried about if they're going to have enough ventilators. The more people that are violating social distancing, being together, stores that are opening, they're just trying to do the very best that they can. It is not my intention to do that. What do you say you think about that and work with me here? Yeah, that's what we're asking for. And if safety is compromised or you have no other recourse, of course, you have to take action. But a pro, in my opinion, 9 times out of 10 will end that case where the store owner will say to him at the end, what's your name again? It's Officer Jones. Jones, you know I'm not mad at you. It's just that these are... I know that, sir. And what do you want to say to yourself? You left them better than you found them. Tough times for us all, but please remember those 2 words for me. Remember the rhetorical perspective. What does Aristotle teach us? 3 steps. 3 steps is all he taught us, and that's what I want you to remember. Bosses, rank and file, everybody. Don't worry, it's not a lesson in philosophy, right? What is the definition of philosophy but the love of wisdom? That's all it is. I'm older now, I can tell you this stuff makes sense as I got older. I didn't pay attention to this in high school and college. Sure does make sense to me today. Well, how do you mean, Chief? Ethos, police legitimacy, my credibility. I demonstrate that when I get out of my car. I demonstrate that to you today when I first started with my thank you for all that you're doing. Yeah. And then what's next? What's the logical reason for what we're doing? There's a hospital down the road and they need those they got to have those ventilators. We can't have more people getting sick, so would you work with me here? Logic. It's just a logical argument for it. Taking the time to do that, we could do this in 1 minute. And what's the last step, he said? Pathos. What's the emotional appeal? What brings it to you? So why did he come up with this? How did Aristotle, did he invent it? Of course he didn't invent it. He just noted it. All right, let's argue that he was a genius, and he picked up on things. He said, why is it that these people can communicate well, the great orators of his day in written form? What is it that they do? Well, they do a couple of things. First thing they do is audiences aren't found, they're made. You see, that's why if you have an officer shitstorm or somebody there pointing at people, doing this, you're making your audience. Right? I had an opportunity to make my audience at the very beginning of my presentation. Well, then I make my audience. I use my credibility. I talk to you about my years of experience. Then I give you the logical reason for the challenging times we're in, what we're facing with 3 million people just put on unemployment. This is just a tremendous jolt to everybody. That's logic. We need to turn up our response. And then I gave you the emotional appeal. And I hope you heard it. I wish I was back in the police car. Why? I admire you. I believe in you. And I loved every day going to work. And I'm retired. I can only teach you now, but I admire you. That is my utilization of the rhetorical perspective. But he didn't invent it. What he said was people who communicate from their heart and do well follow these 3 steps. As I close down my presentation, let me try to give you an example of how great leaders communicate, how they step up and they take the lead, and how they use the rhetorical perspective. Now, I was sitting at home the other day, and I mean this very apolitically, just listening to the news like you about the pandemic and what we need to do. Well, then Dr. Birx makes a statement. And Dr. Birx, by the way, is the coordinator of the White House coronavirus task force. So as I'm listening to and watching her, does she give me confidence? Absolutely. She seems like a very learned person. I don't know her. I don't know anything about her career. But she has some ethos going, and she looks the part, she's acting the part, and she's talking to me, and she seemed very credible. Then, after she's established her credibility, she starts giving me the logic and the logos for her argument. She talks about the spread of this virus, how it occurs, the logical reason why social distancing and everything that we're hearing today is so vitally important. I'm saying, I'm buying this. I admire this doctor. And then to make sure it's real to me, and this is the part as a police officer, because I'm as a retired officer, I'm stressing for all the men and women on the front line. This could become challenging. And she shows us all something why this is important, because of the emotional reason why, right? It's when an officer would say to somebody, sir, you don't want me to fight you in front of your son and daughter here, do you? Come on, work with me here. That's the emotional reason. That's the appeal. And many of you have had people comply with you because of that. So what is the good Dr. Birx wanting? Compliance from people across the country. And how does she do it? Well, she tells us a story. Remember I said at the beginning of the presentation, you'll remember my statistics on the graphs 5% of the time, but you're going to remember her story. And here's what she said. She told everyone the story about her grandmother, Leah, who lived with a lifetime of guilt because she caught the flu at school and in turn infected her mother. You see, Leah's mother, who had just given birth, died of the flu. one of the estimated 50 million worldwide who died in the 1918 influenza epidemic, Burke said. And she said her grandmother lived with a lifetime of guilt over that. Hearing that, I wanted to do more for my community. And it's not about filling up cars. It's about making sure those types of messages get out. An extraordinary example, and I don't know her, and I don't know her background, but it sure is the type of leadership we need right now. Remember, I said that what I really think this argument today has been is leadership in this time of crisis. What do we want? Leaders that stand tall. See, this is the moment of truth. So let me close with one last phrase. Carpe diem. Seize the day. We're counting on you, every one of you, and you're doing brilliantly. And remember, this will pass. And your place, as Roosevelt said, will never be with those cold and timid souls who didn't know victory or defeat. You're in the arena, and God bless you, and thank you.